Speaking of expensive shit,
Shadow
of the Tomb Raider is apparently going to cost upwards of $100 million to make.
That's ridiculous.
But here's the thing: nowadays, triple to quadruple A, it's not even that surprising anymore.
So I recently watched. After you.
Well, it's that the important thing here is like, because this is an article, right? And my first thing upon hearing this was like, okay, this is interesting that this is a story, because obviously that's a lot more.
It's a lot.
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot.
But it's also becoming regular.
No, I disagree.
But
it's becoming regular for certain studios.
Yes.
Kotaku said they did the math and they projected that some things cost upwards to $200 million.
Right.
That is the norm for specific studios. I would say like Bethesda gets that. I'd say certain Capcom projects that they shouldn't have allowed.
So there's a lot of
that.
There's a lot of factors that kick in, right? And in particular, when you start
Rockstar.
Rockstar gets us anything they want.
When what you're developing, where you choose to develop it makes a huge difference.
God of War assuredly got more than that.
Right. And Montreal is a city that is like a lot of game studios set up here because there's tax breaks. Huge tax breaks.
Yeah.
That allow them to hire more employees
Video games.
to make the game bigger, which ends up means it costs more and more. But anyway, so yeah, in an interview with David Alfonsi, he said that the game's development, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, will cost between $75 and $100 million, and $35 million will be spent on marketing and promotion. And it just kind of like was one of those like eyebrow raisers for folks.
It's been a while since we've had a number thrown out there.
I guess so. But yeah, to me, this is not. I'm not shocked by this news.
So
this is like starting to become the cost of doing business for major studios that
I recently watched
are developing games in environments with like highly creative and highly paid employees.
So
where the cost of living is high.
I recently watched a video that makes a difference too. A channel called Archipel, I believe it is. And it's called Ebb and Flow, the recent rise, what's it called? The conversations on the recent momentum of Japanese video games. And it's an interview series in which they go and talk to Yoko Taro. They go and talk to Tetsuya Mizuguchi. They go talk to the head of Team Ninja, Nagoshi from the Yakuza series. They talk all these folks. It's like, so what's up with that period of between 2010 and 2016 when Japanese games just, kind of fucked off, really? And talks about that and how they make games. But there's one thing that Yoko Taro talks about in particular that makes me think about this quite a bit. And he describes the difference between the Japanese development process and the Western development process. And he goes, in the West, everything has been streamlined and there's kind of a committee structure and everything needs to go smoothly. Because when you're making a AAA game and the game costs $100 million, there is no room for trouble.
Yes.
There is no room for mistakes or roadblocks or any of that shit because it'd be a fucking huge disaster.
Which is why UB games are what they are.
And it's why Square keeps doing the same thing that Square keeps doing. Where they want to make games of that size, but they never made that structure to make things go smooth. So you get FF15's development and now FF7 Remake's development and so on.
Oh, shit, yeah.
And
it's the fiscally responsible thing to do.
Yes.
Right. And he says, well, Japan doesn't have that. In Japan, we never really figured that out. And so the director has a lot more control. And as a result, Japanese games seem to do a lot better when they are not triple A.
It's why Platinum exists.
They are everything between Platinum and, let's say, Nier Automata.
So,
in terms of scope and scale and cash money.
A couple weeks ago, Jimquisition did a special episode specifically on how the reason why everything being AAA sucks, and the fact that needs to go away, and the fact that in the PS2 era we had a plethora of B games.
Well, I love. Look at Yakuza series. Yakuza series, is very small. It's very dense. It has a lot of detail, but it's not super big, right? In terms of whatever. And they get some of that money back based on the insane amount of ads that are in those games. But those ads actually make it better, so it's fine.
Because half the time, it's just two characters talking to each other for an hour, whereas like in Tomb Raider, it's going to be her destroying a country.
There's a need.
There is a different cost.
There's a wild difference in scale here.
There's a need for that mid-range, and it scratches an itch that like existed during the PS2 era that never went away, but it just became became more
less and less.
Well, it just became more incentivized for like larger studios to just go like, let's go all in on fewer titles that are bigger and bigger every year until we can pretty much like take like if each time we put out a game, it takes over a sizable chunk of the market.
Yeah.
It's more worth it to just build that one thing into a larger event.
Yeah, but like
release.
The thing with Japanese releases is stuff like Persona 5 and Nier.
Oh, they also spoke to Hoshino from Persona 5 as well.
And Breath of the Wild. These are all dead ends. No one wants. They should. Battle Royale is such green territory. Japan needs to stop this single player bullshit.
It's a really fantastic little documentary. I think everybody should take a look at it. My favorite part of it is the way they talk about. I think it's who was it? I forget who it was. It was one of the Japanese developers talking to a guy from Ubisoft. It was a Capcom guy talking to a guy from Ubisoft when they were collaborating on something. And he's like, maybe we should do this because Western players like that. And the Ubisoft guy goes, why are you even talking about that? Why do you care about Western players? You're a Japanese developer and you have your own strengths. You should be focusing on those strengths that I like instead of trying to cater to these people or whatever, right? And like that chase for Western trends led to shit like quantum theory and all that garbage.
But that's where the money is.
Yeah, well, hey, look at that. A bunch of Japanese games that were Japanese as fuck have done super well recently.
Mm-hmm.
Like Automata, Persona, and Yakuza couldn't be more non-Western. And they did great. And I look at Tomb Raider as 100 million. It's like, boy, I hope there's no problems on that project.
Remember when the reboot...
Every once in a while, though, we encounter modes or features or things where we're like, okay, that's too Japanese. Back it off a bit.
Yeah. Remember when the first Tomb Raider reboot came out and reportedly sold like 3.5 million copies, and Square was like, this is a massive disaster.
Do you mean the Tomb Raider reboot or the second Tomb Raider reboot?
I mean Square's Tomb Raider.
Do you mean Tomb Raider Legend?
Square's Tomb Raider.
All right.
Anyway, the first reboot is called Tomb Raider. It sold 3.5, and they're like, "This is a
disaster!"
Disaster.
Yeah.
And then it turned out fine, I guess.
And it's like, oh yeah, we'll let FF15 sit in limbo for a decade.
Because again, it's the idea that it's like you're dealing with gangbusters development costs, so you need gangbuster sales, and when they're not, right? Well, yeah, it's 3.4 million sales were considered a financial failure for Tomb Raider, and right, the Mankind Divided also flopping was an issue.
I'm not sure if that's an old quote down there, but it says, Eidos Montreal, we have to try new models for single-player games. No,
you don't.
You just have to make them, and that is now a new model. That doesn't happen
That
has
actually become a new model once again.
But if they're not making, if they're not making, like, making ends meet is a thing that like you can do with smaller sizes.
It is baffling to me that the same company that bankrolled Nier Automata in its small scope and extra huge success is the company that runs the decisions that gives Tomb Raider $100 million, or is the same company that lets the FF7 remake get scrapped entirely and then start over. Like, it's baffling. Like, or the one that gladly takes in like maybe a third of their company revenue from their MMO, but then doesn't put any money back into that MMO, which is very frustrating.
Like, I'm trying to find the right analogy here, and the closest thing I can think of is when you slowly get up and move from table to table when you're playing at the casino, and you eventually get to your high roller fucking gate, and then you go into the high roller gate and you sit down with the big boys, and now
I'm gonna go back to the small time?
Exactly. And now you're just like, well, we're sitting at this table now.
There was no way Shadow of the Tomb Raider would cost less money than Rise of the, like, they're like,
the smallest chip
more.
You're putting down is a black chip, right? We're not going back from, we're not backing down from that.
That's how shit happens, like Dead Space getting killed.
Yeah.
That's how that happens.
The attempt to make it bigger than it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, granted, it's Tomb Raider, so I don't think there's actually a worry there, right? But with other things, this absolutely, like the two games that Square Enix / Eidos does this with are Tomb Raider and Final Fantasy. You know what? I think those franchises are going to be fine. Like no matter what fucking misstep
But it doesn't
happens.
quite work with Deus Ex or Thief.
Right.
And here's the other issue too, is that just not even in terms of like keeping your mind on your own project, but thinking about your competition. Mm-hmm. If you're making mid-sized products, right?
Your competition's making big ass shit.
And they're marketing the fuck out of them.
Yeah.
And the idea of you picking some point in the year to come out when you're going up against something that is a beast of a quadruple A product means that your thing is going to sink in the water and die.
I would actually like to
They're afraid of that.
To start calling some of these games quadruple A because there's a clear difference between something like God of War and Tomb Raider. Yeah, that is.
Yeah, that I've been using it.
Oh, you've been using it?
No,
okay.
that is a term.
You're right. Because like there's a God of War, every single time we sit down to play that, like money explodes out of the screen at us, and it's like uncomfortable.
Yeah,
there's so much.
No. That is quadruple A. That is the entire video game industry made room for the release of this video game.
What's triple A nowadays?
Triple A, I would say, is an Assassin's Creed game.
Triple A is this Shadow of the Tomb Raider.
And double
this
A
is quadruple A.
Yeah, this is quadruple A. And then double
reading an article about how it's the most expensive thing ever.
But okay, because the AAA quadruple A, there's cost, right? Well, there's two things. There's cost and then there's impact, right? When Tomb Raider games come out, they have an impact, but they don't take over the industry.
Yeah, he's got a point.
Yeah, but neither did God of War Ascension. Like
Ascension, no.
Things die off. And I think Tomb Raider sells more now than it did before. Maybe I'm not sure.
Any COD blops, any Battlefield, I'd say. Maybe.
So aside from God of War, what's another quadruple A?
I just said.
Sorry.
Any COD blops.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were saying that was triple.
Yeah.
Any Battlefield.
Oh, that's a triple.
Anything like
the more I think about this, the more I realize that the double A category is like all of my favorite games.
Yeah.
Anything Rockstar is quadruple A.
Yes.
When Rockstar
Red Dead Redemption 2
when Rockstar makes a game and they release it, it is an event, the whole thing, everyone makes fucking space for this game to drop. That's quadruple A.
Madden and FIFA as well.
Yeah, but that's more of a
dude. When I used to work at we worked at a grocery store, but whatever. Yeah. Fucking Madden Day, every single fucking person that called in sick, like the boss wanted to go to their house and fucking stab them. It was awful. And then the boss started calling sick on Madden Day. Fucking head of certain departments just, I'm sick. It's Madden.
It's debatable whether or not like you'd throw like Breath of the Wild into that.
Nah.
No, I don't. But I don't feel like Nintendo is at that level.
Not.
I don't feel like
Nintendo is the master of making their AA games look like AAAs.
Yeah, I guess that's one way to put it. But yeah, that's what your definition is.
It's like God of War, like the dragon's nail gets a little too close to the camera, and you see a billion tiny details that don't need to be there, but they're there because dragon looked nice.
Or stories that like never end when you're on the boat.
Yeah, man.
More than you'll ever need to hear.
I did some of that shit, and just like the stories never go. They never stop. There's more and more and more and more and more. He's like a textbook.
This one is